Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on today. Right now, I was on the bill as a Republican, the emergency response to COVID. And I do echo the good senator's statements regarding the health crisis. This has been a health and economic crisis for our state of Washington. It's been very stressful for all our members and constituencies. We know that we had that initial response where we wanted to make sure the governor had the ability to respond quickly. I also requested that the governor not have 50 million or 100 million. I thought maybe it should be almost a billion, which it's turned into. It's been a huge crisis, both healthcare and economically. But unfortunately, we need to come together as a legislature and look at the emergency powers reform. We need to make sure we continue to legislate while allowing the governor to respond on that ebb and flow when we have high spikes like you're seeing this week. And so making sure that we as legislators continue to be able to be heard in our local areas and reflect that and how COVID is reflecting in our local areas. Unfortunately, it's been difficult to share that as a legislator in the last 2 years and really make sure that those local responses are occurring in the Eastern Washington area. So I would like to see a conversation where we return some of the powers back to the legislature. That bill is shocking and concerning. We should be protecting our communities and our most vulnerable, and those are our children asleep in their beds. To lessen these crimes really just puts it in perspective when you have this huge increase in what we've seen as murders, rapes in the last 5 years, just a huge increase in violent crimes. And to have these policies once again look at decreasing penalties instead of looking at to try to lessen these crimes is just it's a travesty for our children, our families, and our communities. We need to start moving towards looking at respecting just the safety of our children asleep in their beds. And everyone's heard the stories, even recently, for drive-by shootings. So to protect those children, we should not be having these policies be dropped. And that is my concern about sometimes these virtual meetings. You don't talk to people who were victims. And I was listening to a press release that the recent victim of or a past victim never got a call. And we should be legislating with the people that are affected by these policies. So the sooner we can get back to talking to the communities, talking to the victims, and talking to the constituencies in which we serve, the better that the state of Washington will be. In the past, we've had policies, and I believe it was Representative Richelli's policy, to look at having our veterans, families who have nursing degrees actually come through the state of Washington and be able to assist and go through the process of being able to work in our healthcare industry. So having that state compact really does assist in some of those. Washington State is not one of the states that allows that. So making sure that we have the ability that we have trained nurses in the state of Washington, in the Spokane area, to be able to work in the state of Washington could immediately assist in this crisis. I have 3 kids in public school, so I definitely feel your concerns too. As this emergency has gone through, the last 8 to 20 months, 24 months, we've really seen this crisis, this emergency button. And I've said this before in interviews. I have concerns when people become apathetic. When it's a constant emergency, we've shut things down, and then we see these high, ebb and flow. We're not responding back and forth. And the governor did, and I will commend him to keep the schools open. You saw, as the good Senator Dingra mentioned, the mental health crisis in our students that did not go to school, and a lot of students that were unable to while others did. So you do see that emergency response, but we held it so long. I do fear that people become apathetic to the state of emergency. And now we have children in crisis, and we want to make sure they continue to get fed, they continue to go to school, their education stays strong. But I share in your concerns, and that's just another reason that we have to respond accordingly to a state of emergencies, not over long periods of times, but hear people and actually have the conversation from the legislature when we are in these crises, so we can immediately respond and respond with an ebb and flow during a health crisis. I think it's really important that we ebb and flow with this COVID crisis. And I've said it before, when we don't have communication across the state as a legislature, and it's being the emergency powers being ran by the governor with little to no communication for the rest of the state. I was just notified yesterday during the surge that there's some parts of my district that don't have a drive-in testing within 50 miles. And so people are making appointments and they're trying to get in, and they're talking days, if not weeks, for a test. This is the important part of hearing from all sides of the state and all corners of the state, that everybody should have equal access to making sure they have testing and availability to take care of this problem. And this happens when we have different parts of the state respond without communication. So we do need testing, and we do need it done, and we need to make sure that people have access to this. And this is just an example of making sure that we have equity across the state. This one question goes into even the workforce question. I've had bills and amendments really looking at making sure our education system actually prepares our children, trains them, and gets them ready for the workforce. And if we had career training apprenticeships in every school, not just 200 miles away. Like some of my schools can only get to a training center in the urban areas like Spokane, and that's just not feasible. There's not even housing available. And so making sure those 18 years, actually, when they leave, they have some kind of sense of accomplishment. Now, we changed the education system to a per student ratio, and that is how we provide education in the state of Washington. And some schools have been very responsive, providing that assistance to homeschool families who are still actually enrolled in the school but can teach at home, and like the good senator just mentioned, online learning, an ALE program. And so you see those alternatives for those schools that are responsive, and those parents should have the opportunity to have their kids in school. And for those schools that are sensitive to those students and actually helping in those alternative ways, should be able to continue to provide that. Making sure that students have options and career training is very important. And as you know, as I know the governor is about to get on, that is one thing that I will commend him on, is keeping those schools open. We've really seen that stress of the students closing schools. So we want to make sure we keep them open and that we prepare them. We need to actually move our education into the 21st century and prepare them and get them ready and have opportunities, whether that's healthcare or a building trade or a college, that everyone has that opportunity, and that is up to the school districts to provide that. And I am definitely emotionally involved in this question. A lot of my rural areas, I've seen buckets in the roof, and even including where my children go to school. It's actually devastating. Some of the states of our classrooms, as you've seen, some of my areas, the cost of their property taxes went up, and so that basic education is a lot for the surrounding communities with low unemployment, inability to sometimes pay those property taxes, and then the increased burden on those bonds. Unfortunately, we're having difficulty, as you well know, and our children are going to school with little to no water, dripping mold. I mean, I could go on and on and on, it's just devastating. So it is something that we do have to look at. I completely agree. I don't know anything about the lawsuit. I don't comment on that, but really looking at how we are funding some of these schools. It's unfortunate, and just in the 7th district, we have schools that are beautiful, new, have heat and cooling, and my children go to school that don't actually have certain heating and cooling in the school. The school has no cooling, so sometimes it is very, very hot and unable to open windows. So the discrepancy in education airflow with more filters is not even available in our schools, and it's devastating to see the difference in education across the state, how some students are housed and how others are not. So I completely agree that is an issue that I have been passionate about, and we do have to look at that, especially in those communities where property taxes has increased significantly. We do not have the tax base to afford it.